you see it? Can you see the bedazzle? I hope you can see the bedazzle. You gotta match your story with your synopsis, dude. I don't know why you didn't do that. She is very annoying. You told us 1, 2, 3 bazillion times. You don't need to tell us anymore. Hello, hi, hello everyone. Welcome, it is me, it is I, hi, welcome, my name is Ivy, also known as the Geek Goddess here on YouTube. And today, as you can see here, we are going to be doing my November wrap up. So in the month of November, because it was the Dungeons and Book Dragons readathon, I read a total of 19 books. It would have been more, but one book was over 1,000 pages. So that could have technically been like 3 other books. But I decided to read one big, massive, giant book. So we're gonna go over this stack here from my lowest rated book up into my highest rated book for November. So let's go ahead and get started. So November was definitely the best reading month for me. I was in a reading slump. I've been in a reading slump because I feel like I've been so focused on reading books just for like reading vlogs and stuff that I stopped reading books that I actually just enjoyed. So it was really nice to go back and read books because I wanted to versus because I had to for a reading vlog, if that makes any sense. And yeah, because it was a readathon, there are different prompts that I had to do, that I had to complete, and I had to pick books based off of those prompts. But that being said, I still had a lot more flexibility versus when I had reading vlogs where I'm like, I have to read this specific book or these specific books in order to do X, Y, and Z vlogs. So it was nice to have a lot more flexibility in the books that I got to read. And that's why I'm going to continue that on to December for the final month of this month. I'm actually not going to do a TBR video because one, I have my very new TBR game that's going to come out next year. My Dungeons and Book Dragons based TBR game that's going to be coming out. And on top of that, I just had a lot of fun reading in November that I really want to just read mood reads in December. There are 2 books that I have to read for a reading vlog, but other than that, I kind of just want to read books just for fun because I missed doing that. So you're not going to see a TBR video from me for this month because I decided to take it slow. I already hit my Goodreads goal, which was to read 100 books. I already surpassed that. So there's no more stress, I feel like, for me. So I'm just going to take it easy now. And so anyways, I know that was like a little rant there, but let's go ahead and go over the 19 books that I read in the month of November from the lowest rating up into the highest. So let's go ahead and get started. So starting at the very tippy top place with a 1-star rating. This is actually a 1-star book. It's going to be a small little novella that I read called Falling by Christina Lauren. This is the second book in this Slayer, I don't know what it's called, but it's basically a series of like monster hunters. The first one was called Hot for Slayer and it was a vampire and a vampire hunter. The second one is about a fallen angel at like this like Halloween or New Year's Eve party, I can't remember. And we're basically following different monsters and entities throughout the series, and they're all told by different authors. The first one was by Ali Hazelwood, and I really enjoyed it. This second one, it was by Christina Lauren, who does write a lot of beloved books. I don't think I've read any from her. Maybe I have. I think I have, actually. I think I read one book by her. But Falling is about this fallen angel, and it was like a 53 pages, and it was basically like a very adult romance novel. And it literally, like, even though it was 53 pages and the characters, they literally just fell in love so quick within like an hour or 2, and then they decided they were going to be together for the rest of their lives after knowing each other for an hour or 2. It just was really, I don't know, just that whole concept. How can you meet somebody for an hour or 2 and be like, yes, I want to be there with them for the rest of my life? It just makes no sense to me. So I could have like, I just did not like it. And it doesn't have the highest reviews on Goodreads either. So I'm with the masses on this one, and I didn't enjoy this one at all. So that's going to be my 1-star read, and it's probably going to be added onto my worst books of 2025. Now moving on with a 2-star read. So coming in with 2 stars is going to be Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales by Heather Fawcett. I know it is so sad that this book happens to be on my very bottom, on the very bottom, the rock bottom of the monthly reads, because I was anticipating this book so much, but after, I don't know why, it just started going down the toilet after the first one. The first one was like a 4 or 5-star read for me. I really loved it. The second one was like a 3-star read, and then this one just it just kind of crashed and burned for me. I don't know if it's because I waited too long to read the third one. I don't know if it's because I just didn't like these characters anymore. I don't know what it was, but it just missed the mark for me, and I can't even pinpoint why. It is forgetful. It was very forgetful, whereas the first book specifically still stands out in my mind, even though I read it like 2 years ago or over 2 years ago. 2 years ago or over 2 years ago? I think it was over 2 years ago now. This one does not, and I don't remember this one at all, and I just read it. Like, it just, I don't know. It just sucks because I had such high hopes for this book, especially the conclusion. I absolutely love cozy fantasy. You guys know that it is my genre. It is my genre. And this one, unfortunately, missed its mark. So this was a 2-star read for me. Fortunately, it was a flop. I don't know if this is going to go in my worst books of 2025. It might. I'm going to try not to put it on there though. So that's a 2-star for me. Now this is going to be like a 2.25 star, and that is Watermoon by Samantha Soto Yambao. So the synopsis for this does not match the story in itself, and maybe that's what threw me off so much, and I noticed that it throws off a lot of people. So we are told in this story that we are basically following a character, right? I forgot what her name is. I'm trying to remember. Hana. So Hana is a pawn shop owner, and she basically takes people's memories, I think. So it's a pawn shop where you can sell your regrets, and she embarks on this journey to find her father, because she finds the pawn shop kind of like ransacked, and then she goes to find her dad. Now, when she gets to this pawn shop, this guy ends up just stumbling into her pawn shop, and he's from like our world, and he's like, "Hey, I'm not supposed to be here. I thought this was a restaurant." And she's like, "No, you've fallen into my magical pawn shop." And then all of a sudden it is a romance. This is a romance that was not sold as a romance. In fact, they don't even mention the other main character's name in the synopsis at all. So was completely different from the synopsis, and you're expecting one thing and you got completely something different. And I think it's because I was expecting a story like what the synopsis was promising me, and instead I got a romance story. I don't know if that's what threw me off, or just the story in its entirety, or that started it, and then from there it just kind of was like, was bombarded with like, why is this happening? Why is this happening when it's supposed to be about this? And because of that, it just kind of caused this domino effect of unfortunate circumstances and disappointments, and then we ended up with a very dissatisfying read in the very end. So I just didn't really like it. I wanted to. The cover in itself is literally one of the most beautiful covers I've ever seen in my life, but unfortunately the story in itself just did not hold my interest, and it was not what I was promised. And it's just, man, like you gotta match your story with your synopsis, dude. I don't know why you didn't do that. So 2 stars, and I might put that one in my worst of the year, maybe. Now coming in at 2.5 stars, it's going to be this little manga that I read. This is my daughter's manga, but I read it and it is called The Ice Guy and the Cool Girl by Miyuki Tanogaya. And in this one we are following two characters, and we are following this descendant of a snow spirit, which I still remember because she says it on pretty much every page. And then we are following this girl, and they work in an office together, and basically everybody treats this ice guy a specific kind of way because he has the power to create snowstorms, and it gets really cold in the office, but she actually befriends him, and she treats him with respect, and he ends up having a crush on her, and vice versa, and you just see their relationship start to blossom. The thing that threw me off about this book is, one, every other page she says, my coworker is a descendant of a snow spirit. And throughout the whole book, that's what she's consistently saying over and over again. And I don't know how many times we have to hear, my coworker is a descendant of a snow spirit, because we already know. You told us 1, 2, 3 bazillion times. You don't need to tell us anymore. If she mentioned it once, twice, even 3 times in the story would have been fine, but it was literally every other page that started with, my coworker was a descendant of a snow spirit. And that threw me off. And then on top of that, not to mention, it kind of reads, instead of like a consistent story, it kind of reads like a sitcom where every different little chapter is its own unique different story. So instead of getting one whole consistent ongoing story, we got bits and pieces of different little stories, which I guess maybe it was because I wasn't expecting it. I just didn't really like it. I'm not sure if this originally started as like a smaller story they got put together in one volume, but it's honestly not that thick. And that's why it was written that way, but it just kind of threw me off. And unfortunately, I didn't really enjoy it as much as I would have if it weren't for those things. So 2.5 stars for this little manga. We have one last 2.75 star, and that is going to be Rachel Harrison's Plain Ice. Now, I was so excited to read this book. This book has been on my TBR since I first got it in from my Book of the Month box. And in this one, we are following our main character, Chloe. And Chloe is a influencer. She is very annoying. She is very annoying. Like how you see every stereotypical influencer, that's pretty much how she acts, and it's very annoying. And honestly, Rachel Harrison threw me off with this character. And I was able to look past it because of the hauntings. And so we follow her as she inherits her mother's home, and her mother grew up with this house being haunted, and then there's a demon, this entity being in this house. She ended up writing a book about it, and then her dad, Chloe's dad, promised that her and her sisters will never read her mother's book. And so she doesn't, up until she inherits the house. She decides to do a DIY project for her social media, and then she finds her mom's book with a note that says, Chloe, please read this. And then she finds out that the demon took a liking to her specifically. And then Chloe wakes up, and then she starts seeing messages sent from this entity. But is it the entity? Is it her? We don't know. Well, you do know after reading it. But this book was like, I just had such high hopes, and I was even willing to look past the very annoying main character. And the story did hold my interest enough. But honestly, I just felt like even though I was hanging in there by a thread because the story was carrying it and definitely not the character, and I hated being, I don't even know, is it third person? No, it is told from being in her head, being in her very annoying head. I was willing to look past it, but unfortunately the finale completely flopped for me. It was very anticlimactic. There's this sort of buildup for what this thing is, this entity coming into the house, and us finding out more about the past and how Chloe is linked to this demon, and you're expecting this big grand explosion of a plot twist or something to really wow you, and it just doesn't do that. It's very anticlimactic. Nothing really ever happens, and you wait for this buildup, and it builds up, and it just fizzles out. just fizzles out instead of it being like a big boom, if that makes any sense. So because of that, I'm going to give this book a 2.75 stars. I really wanted to like it, and unfortunately I did not. Let's move on to our 3 stars. The first 3 star that we are going to talk about is Under Lock and Key by Lana Ferguson. So this character, in this book, we are following 2 characters. We are following Key and we are following Lachlan, who is the Loch Ness Monster. Now, Key, or Kiana, she has a family that was in Scotland. However, her father does not speak to that family until her father ends up passing away. He had dementia. He ended up passing away from anemia, I believe. And then Key ends up taking his ashes to Scotland because that was his wish, to go back to Scotland and to take her there. And so she decides to take him there one last final time, or their first time together, I guess. And Key always grew up with her father telling her the story of how her father was saved by the Loch Ness Monster. And as a kid, Kiana was like, yes, oh my gosh, this is such a beautiful story. And she completely believed it. But as she grew older, of course, she stopped believing in the Loch Ness Monster, and she just kind of thought that this was just a story. However, after her dad had dementia, it was the only thing that he remembered. So she ends up going to this lake where he supposedly encountered the Loch Ness Monster and is about to drop his ashes when this very grumpy man named Lachlan is like, hey, it's dangerous there. Are you dumb? And then he realizes that Kiana is not from around there and that she wants to go to visit her grandmother that doesn't even know, has never even met her. And then he's like, you might be in for a surprise because this is not a sweet woman. And then he ends up living with them because he is one of the caretakers in the household, or he does the gardening. I forgot what he does, but he works somewhere in the household. And so she goes to see her grandma, and she gets a very cold welcome. Like she doesn't even want her there. And that leads to this like rocky start. But then after that, we eventually find out that Lachlan is a Loch Ness Monster, and the story kind of ensues from there. Now, this is a romance. So obviously, in order to really get into the romance, you want to like both characters. Now, Kiana, she was cute. She was okay. She wasn't my favorite character, but she definitely wasn't terrible. However, Lachlan, on the other hand, was very, very annoying, and I just didn't like him as a love interest at all. I just thought, like, some grumpy characters, especially like male grumpy characters, I like. But he just came off so, I don't know, I just did not like the way that he acted. Grumpy did not work for him specifically. So because I didn't like him, I just kind of think that kind of is what did it for me, because obviously you're supposed to like the main love interest in a romance. That's the point. You're supposed to want them together. And I did not care for them together. I was not excited when they would talk, or when they would get a little bit further into their relationship, or when their banter turned into little flirtations. I didn't care. And because I didn't care, that is why it's a 3-star, because there was an overall bigger plot in the grand scheme of things. But so that honestly carried the story out a little bit more for me than the romance itself, because if it was strictly just the romance, it would have probably been a 1 or 2 star at most. But because there was a little bit more going on with the plot, there's this mystery behind the Loch Ness Monster and finding out all these little secrets in order to do something I can't even say because I don't want to spoil anything. That's what carried the story. There was a little bit more of a bigger plot to it. Whereas if it was just a romance, like if this was a small town romance, I probably would have DNF'd it or gave it like a 1 or 2 star. So because of the plot, thanks for a little bit of the plot, because that's kind of what carried it. And that sucks because I was really expecting this to be like a 4 or 5 star read for me. The next 3-star that we're going to talk about is I Got Abducted by Aliens and Now I'm Trapped in a Rom-Com by Kimberly Lemming. So Kimberly Lemming was literally like in 2023, she was one of my favorite authors. I read like 3 or 4 books from her, including like these like little mini novellas, and I was absolutely obsessed with her books, starting with The Time That I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. I absolutely adored that book and the main character Cinnamon in it, and ever since then I was like, I want to read everything that she has ever written. So when she was coming out with this book, I was so excited. And unfortunately, it was not as good as I hoped. So this, to me, I thought was going to be more of like a love triangle, but it was more of like a white shoes. So just know going into it, this is more of a white shoes than a love triangle. And we are following our main character, Dorothy Valentine, and she has a PhD in wildlife biology, and she is studying these lemurs when all of a sudden this UFO kind of takes her, but before the UFO takes her, she's about to get eaten by a lion. So UFO ends up taking her and the lion into this planet that has prehistoric creatures. So there's like pink T-Rexes walking around, and then the lion apparently starts talking to her, and they form an alliance together because they're like, yeah, there's bigger fish to fry now. So let's just form a bond. I'm not going to eat you and you're not going to hurt me, and we're going to get through this little island. And then she gets kidnapped by this two very hot aliens, two very sexy aliens, I guess. And they want to put her in this like breeding program. There's like, so in this like it's very like, is it caveman-y romance because of the prehistoric creatures and the fact that they just want her for like breeding. I don't know. I was expecting it to be a lot better than it was. The main character, she was okay. And this is again another one where I just did not care for the love interest. And she had two, you guys. She had two love interests, and I did not care for either one of them. They had no personality whatsoever. And there was, you know what I mean? Like I thought her other books were very funny, so I was expecting the humor, and this one wasn't as humorous. And so, however, it still was a very enjoyable fast read. I finished it in like a day. So that's why I'm giving it a 3-star instead of anything lower, but it still wasn't what I was anticipating / expecting. So that is why it is a 3-star for me. Now moving on to a 3.5 star. So for the 3.5 star, I'm going to talk about The Carrow Haunt by Darcy Coates. Now, Darcy Coates is an author that I want to really read her backlists. So I want to start reading every single book. I want to read every single book that she's written. And so far, I think this is the 5th or 6th book that I've read from her, but I really want to read her backlist. Like that's my goal, is to get through Darcy Coates' backlist. And so far, the majority of her books, actually I've enjoyed all of her books. The lowest rated book that I've had for her is a 3-star. And I've enjoyed pretty much every book that I've read by her. And I've given her multiple 5 stars. And so with The Carrow Haunt, we are following our main character, Remy. And she is basically a tour guide for this very haunted manor that was once a bed and breakfast / hotel. And it was called the Carrow House. And the Carrow House was basically owned by these wealthy people, and people would stay there. And then they ended up hiring a gardener, I believe. And this is like in the 1800s. And then the gardener ends up unaliving the wife, the husband, and he takes over as head of the house, even though he's not head of the house. He's impersonating him, but nobody recognizes that he's impersonating him. He starts to unalive all the guests, and obviously he's a serial unaliver, and then he gets captured, and then eventually the house is turned into a museum, but it is owned by this girl named April, and her parents buy this Carrow House for her because she wants to be a medium. So Remy is on this tour, and she gets asked by these paranormal investigators if she wants to be a part of a 2-week stay at the Carrow House. So in order to obviously talk about the paranormal and the ghosts in the Carrow House. And so she invites April, they invite this medium. And there's quite a few of them that end up staying for 2 weeks. And then we find out that yes, the house is very much haunted, and these ghosts, these spirits, are just as trapped as these characters are in this house, because a rainstorm happens and nobody can get out, and people start to end up winding unalive. So that is the story. It is a mystery. It is a mystery / horror. Darcy Coates writes a lot of cozy horror, and I definitely would put this one along those lines. Like it does have a lot of like dark topics. I still feel like it leans more on the cozy side than it does like super body horror, frightful sort of type of horror, if that makes any sense. Now, we're gonna talk about these, let's talk about these books as a whole. Number one, let's talk about the Fazbear Frights. This one is a 3.5 star for me. And that's because, or did I rate this a 3 star? I think I gave this a 3 star. And this is a graphic novel about different little mini stories in Five Nights at Freddy's. We are following various characters as they encounter Spring Bonnie and other little characters. And this is a collection of 3 different short stories. So if you like the whole FNAF lore, you would probably enjoy this one. However, we did get some characters that are not a part of, like, well, one character specifically that I don't remember seeing in any of the FNAF franchise. So I was just a little turned off by the last story. I'm gonna rate these as a whole because it's a series, but this is a trilogy starting with the Silver Eyes, and then we got the Twisted Ones, and then we got the Fourth Closet. So this is a trilogy that talks about our main character. We're following our main character, Charlie, and Charlie is the daughter of the co-owner of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, and her dad ended up unaliving himself after people started blaming him for these kids missing. And then our main character, Charlie, the daughter, ends up realizing that it wasn't her dad that was committing these crimes, but this other co-owner named William Afton. And so we're basically following the story of Charlie as she starts to uncover the secret behind Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria and what was really happening and going on behind the scenes. And that way she can clear her dad's name, at least for herself, for her sake. And then we're following her throughout like a year or two of her going back to the pizzeria and trying to find out more and more of the secrets that is happening and what originally happened and what is continuing to happen with Freddy Fazbear and the other animatronics. And so this book was really good. I really enjoyed the first one and the second one a lot. I gave them 4 stars. The third one was where it kind of flopped for me. Now, this is a good one if you like the movie. It does loosely follow the movie a little bit, and I can see where it got inspiration from it. And I really hope that the movie does not lean in this direction because I didn't like the direction where it went. But so the third one was a little bit of a flop. So overall, this series is like a 3.5, 3.75 because the other two were 4 stars and the third one was like a 3 star.
Oh yeah.
Now, let's get into my 4 stars. So on the lower end of the 4 stars, this could even be a 3.75, 4 star, low 4 star, and that is going to be Zodiac Academy, Origins of an Academy Bully by Caroline Peckham and Susan Valenti. This is a tiny little novella. This is a Zodiac Academy 0.5, and in this one we are following the origins of Darius. So if you guys are familiar, and I'm not going to spoil anything here, you guys, but if you guys are familiar with the Zodiac Academy series, we are following 2 twins, and basically they find out that they are heirs to this Fae throne and that they're Fae princesses, and in order to inherit their money they have to inherit their throne, and so they get signed up for Zodiac Academy and they have to graduate in order to, you know, inherit the money. And they don't even want the throne, they just want the money, but unfortunately to have the money they need the throne. And then there's these princes that always thought that they were going to rule the celestial kingdom. And then here comes these 2 little nobodies. And they obviously hate the fact that they're going to get their throne ripped away from them. And so they start to bully these 2 girls. And this one we are following one of these shapeshifters named Darius. And this is his origin story, as well as Orion, who is a teacher in the Zodiac Academy series. We're following their stories, their origin story. And we kind of see why Darius acts the way that he acts. Not that I excuse his behavior and his bullying and his horribleness. However, I do now have a new understanding of why he is the way he is and why he is so obsessed with making sure that the girls do not get the throne and that he does instead. So this was a nice little backstory, and I felt like is it crucial? Like, do you need to read this in order to read Zodiac Academy? No, but it definitely does help move the story quite a bit and gives you a very good backstory. Now, moving on to my next 4 star. I read this brick of a book called a little book called Alchemized by Sin Lin Yu. Now, if you guys know, which you probably do because it's been everywhere, you guys know that this story originally started as a Draco Hermione fanfiction called Manacled. And then it got traditionally published, so the name had to be changed, the characters' names had to be changed, and the world building had to change a little bit as well for copyright reasons. However, you can still kind of tell who's who, and you kind of know. It's pretty obvious. Like, they're called the Undying. The Death Eaters are the Undying. Hermione is Helena. So you kind of know who these characters are. And this is a very dark version of the Harry Potter like fan fiction story. This is basically if Harry Potter, aka in the story his name is Luke, ends up dying and Lord Voldemort, aka Moreau, wins, and Draco, aka Kane Farron, ends up being his right-hand man, what would happen? And then Hermione ends up getting captured. What would happen? And so we're following her, and then they capture Helena, and she ends up having these very crucial memories that Moreau, the Dark Lord, really wants. And so they try to extract her memories, and they sent her to the High Reeve, aka Kane Farron, in order to try and get these memories extracted, because they think that it's going to be crucial for his whole undying, make him basically more powerful and unstoppable. And so we're following this romance, and believe me, guys, this is a very dark romance, so please check trigger warnings. There's all kinds, there's SA, there's ZA, there's a lot of triggers in this book, and definitely a lot of lines are blurred, so definitely look it up. I enjoyed this one. I didn't enjoy it as much as I anticipated. I thought I was going to give this a 5-star rating. I thought I was going to be absolutely obsessed. Unfortunately, I was not obsessed, but I was still highly enjoyed it. And this is a book that I can honestly tell you, most books that are this thick, I say do not need to be this thick, especially if it's a romance. However, this book, because it is a war in the aftermath of a war, I feel like the size wasn't too long. It was long, but for the story for the story's sake, it makes sense why it was this long. I hope that makes sense. So I did enjoy the story. I did enjoy the characters. It just didn't have me in its grasp as much as it does for a lot of people, which is why I gave a 4-star, not a 5. So that's my little review for Alchemized, and please stay tuned for this book as well as 2 other books, because I'm going to do a reading Draco or Hermione fanfiction and determine to find out which one is the best. So stay tuned for that video. That's probably going to come out in February. So next, for my 4 stars, I read Love and Other Conspiracies by Mallory Marlowe. This book was so cute, you guys. I think it's because, we are following our main character, and her name is Hallie. And Hallie, she basically is working for this web series or this web company, and her job is about to be obsolete, and so her friend is like, hey, if you can find somebody to make a show with and pitch it and they take it, you can be the producer and you won't lose your job. And she's like, okay. So one night she's home, she's eating, and then she starts listening to this podcast randomly about this paranormal conspiracy theorist or conspiracy theories. And she ends up watching an interview. At first it comes on as an interview, and then she ends up listening to the podcast. And even though she doesn't believe in these conspiracy theories or these paranormal events, it still really interests her. And then she thinks the guy is very good looking, so she decides to email him, shoot him an email and be like, hey, are you interested in being a part of a web series? And he ends up really being like, yeah, let's do it. However, on camera, he is not the same as on the podcast, and he is very shy. So she starts to bounce ideas off of him and basically arguing with him about different theories, because obviously she's a skeptic and he's a believer. And the people that are behind the scenes really like the dynamic between the two. And so they end up being like, okay, we're going to put you, you're going to be in front of the camera too, and it's going to be like a 2-person duo. And so this, because it takes place in LA, right? We have them visiting these really cool locations that I know that I've even been to. They even end up staying at the Queen Mary, which you guys know is like, I love that ship. And I think because of that, I loved it. I loved it. I loved the romance. I loved all the conspiracy aspects. I don't know if Mallory Merlot, the author, is a fan of conspiracies. Another book is also about conspiracies. It's called Love at First Sighting. So I feel like she's very into the paranormal as well. I could be wrong, but she definitely did a lot of research because it was so cool to see this character, the conspiracy theorist, bring out all these like paranormal investigative tools, and he's like, this is an EMF meter, this is a spirit box, and I was like, I know what that is, I know what that is. And then they were staying in the Queen Mary, and they were staying in like the most haunted room, which is B340, and I was like, I know what that room is, I've been in there. And it was just so fun. It was so much fun. So because of all of that, I really enjoyed this book a lot. This is probably, I might even bump this up to like a 4.5. It's definitely probably an LA thing, but I loved it. And the fact that it's a paranormal LA thing, which is very much my vibe, I loved it. I loved it. Now we are finally moving on to my 5 stars, and I am so excited to say that I read 19 books this month and 3 of them were 5 stars. I feel like that's still a good amount, right? I think it's a good amount. So let's get to my 5 stars, starting with The Ravenous Dead, also by Darcy Coates. Now, this is the second book in a series called the Gravekeeper series, the first one being The Whispering Dead, and then this one we are following our main character, Kira. And Kira is basically running from her life. She has amnesia. She doesn't remember who she is, but then she goes to the small town after she's being hunted by these people, and she realizes that she can speak to ghosts, and then she stays in this little cozy town and ends up trying to solve the mysteries behind these ghosts, how they were unalived, and helping them pass on basically to whatever comes next. And this is just such a beautiful, cozy story. The first book was a 5-star read for me. The second book is also a 5-star read. This just gives you, even though it has horror elements in it, and again, it has heavier topics, it still feels like a warm, cozy hug. You know what I mean? It's like having hot chocolate or like pumpkin spice or going to the pumpkin patch on a Halloween season eve, if that makes any sense. That's what it feels like. So it's definitely a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it because it's the second book. I can't really go into detail about it, but just know that I enjoyed it. I loved continuing to follow these characters, and I fall more and more in love with this world, these characters, the story, each and every book in. And I definitely am going to get to the 3rd book, at least I'm hoping, this month in December. Now, moving on. The next book that was a 5-star is Welcome to the Hyeonamdong Bookshop by Hwang Bo Ryeom. Now, this book, if Convenience Store Woman and Legends and Lattes had a baby, it would probably be this book right here. Okay, so we are following this woman named Youngju, and she basically is a very goal-oriented person, and she decides that one year that she wants to open a bookshop. So she dedicates 1 year of her life into reaching that goal, and at the end of the year, yes, she opens a bookshop. And does she think that she's gonna do this for the rest of her life? No, she knows that bookshops are hard to continue running. She knows that she's not going to be a millionaire, billionaire, but she just wants to live a simple life and be happy. And opening up a bookshop makes her happy, at least at the moment. So she opens up this bookshop, and it's literally just we're just following her opening up this bookshop and coming up with these new ideas for the bookshop. And it's just a beautiful little story. I believe this is this is a Korean story. It is a Korean bookshop, and it definitely is just a very cozy read. As you can see, I tabbed the shiznit out of it because there are so many beautiful quotes, pieces of advice pieces of wisdom that I ended up tabbing. Not only that, but I really liked the main character because she was very ambitious, very goal-oriented, very focused and driven by her goals. And still just the drive behind all of it is to be happy. And I really enjoyed her. I really enjoyed her because of that. Like, I felt like she was a very relatable character. Like, I saw myself in her, or I saw herself in me, I don't know. And it was just very enjoyable. And let me just share some of these quotes that I got from here. Like, it says, look, having something you're interested in clears the airway. Clears the airway. It makes breathing easier. And when that happens, life seems much more bearable. And then there's just beautiful quotes like that, you know, like, why are you in a rush? You don't have to worry. If coming here isn't boring, just come over more often. Be who you are right now and you'll be fine. Being happy by doing something you enjoy is possible. I'm sure there are such people out there. At the same time, there are also people who are happy when doing what they're good at. And it's a case by case thing. And they say that it's a case by case thing. So you can see, like, the quotes are just so beautiful. Like, a day well spent is a life well lived. It's just so cute. Like, it's so cute. The story's just so beautiful. The quotes are just so beautiful. Unfortunately, I had to read this book very fast because it was for the readathon, and I had to read it in like 5 days. But I wish that I could have taken a little bit more time with this, so I could really just take in all the pieces of wisdom and advice and just beauty that is this story. So I might even go back and reread it just because I enjoyed it that much. This is a book that I feel like has to be read in bite-sized pieces instead of all at once. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was just a beautiful, beautiful story. And I just, you know, I love my cozy fiction, and like, I thought I just liked cozy fantasy, but apparently I'm gonna start to look for more books like this, which is just general cozy fiction. Like, there's no fantasy whatsoever in this. It was just you know what I mean? And I still really enjoyed it. So I seem to like books like this. So if you guys know books that are like this, that are very cozy, day-to-day stuff, like Convenience Store Woman, like Welcome to the Hannam Dung Bookshop, please send me your recs, because I apparently like this stuff. And lastly, but certainly not least, my favorite book of November is going to be a book that a lot of people are like, why? Why is this your favorite book? And let me tell you, I have no idea. To be honest, I just think it could have been the combination of the fact that I've been reading a lot of horror and just staying away from the romance genre in general for the most part. Obviously, I read more romance afterwards, but this was like the first romance that I've read in a while. And I don't know if it's because of that made me obsessed with it, or just the synopsis as a whole was very unique to me. And that is none other than Fading at the End of the World by Geneva Rose. In this one, we are following our main character, Casey Pearson. And Casey Pearson, she basically grows up with a doomsday prepper father. And she has to constantly keep prepping for the end of the world. And as she gets older, she starts to get made fun of, and specifically by this boy named Blake. And she ends up telling her dad, yeah, when the world ends, we're going to make sure he's on the other side of the fence. And the dad's like, yeah, we're going to make sure that he's looking at you. And then and like wanting to come inside and so that he knows that we were right. And then she's like, yeah. But as she gets older, she starts to think that her dad's like crazy. And so she ends up separating herself from him. She goes to college. She ends up becoming a doctor, and she ends up engaged to another ER doctor. And one day she's working at the ER when all of a sudden a patient takes a bite out of her and they start biting a whole bunch of other people. And thus the zombie apocalypse ensues, and we are following her and her fiance, and they are living in this little apartment months after the end of the world happens. And somebody ends up breaking into the apartment and ends up trying to take her and the fiance, and the fiance ends up running away after they capture her, and she's like, WTF, dude. And so then she ends up beating those guys up because her father obviously taught her how to fight because he was a doomsday prepper. And she ends up trying to find her fiance, and he ends up taking off with the car. So she has to take her junky truck, and she doesn't know where to go. So she ends up going to her father's house that has a doomsday bunker prepped area. And she realizes that her whole family is there. And not only is her family there, but unfortunately, in her room where she's supposed to be staying, there's none other than Blake, her arch rival from like high school that was like I don't know, more than a decade before, ends up being in this bunker, and it is a very enemies to lovers, very funny, very cute, a lighthearted, even though it is about the end of the world story. It was just very unique. I love the concept of this zombie apocalypse. I love zombie apocalypse stories, but it being a romance, I just thought it was just so cool. And it was just, our main character is just so badass. Casey's just such a badass. I like her. I like the love interest. It was just such a good story, and I literally was eating this shiznit up. The only thing is that the last paragraph or so kind of threw me off. I hated the last paragraph. I wish that just wasn't in there. So I honestly pretend that the last paragraph wasn't in there so that I could keep it a 5-star rating. Overall, this was just a really good book. I absolutely loved it, and it is definitely going to end up in one of my top books of the year, if not the #1 top book of the year. Oh my gosh, you know what? I realized I missed one. I missed Dungeon Crawler Carl. As you can see, my daughter bedazzled this one for me, but I missed this book. So hi, this is another 5-star read for me, and this is another book that's going to be on my top books of the year. And in this one, this is a lit RPG in which we are following our main character Carl, and it basically, Carl is outside, is like his cat, his ex-girlfriend's cat named Princess Donut, ends up jumping out the window, so Carl has to go save her. And then as soon as he goes to go save her, the whole world like flattens out, like everything just smashes and all the buildings collapse, and all of a sudden this alien voice comes on, and they're like, you have a few hours to get into this dungeon, and if you master all the levels, then you will become the ruler of your universe, and if not, then, well, you probably will be unalived. And so he ends up going through this dungeon, and he starts fighting these different monsters. And it's so funny. It literally, like, there hasn't been a book that made me laugh out loud this much for a very, very long time. It was just absolutely hilarious. Princess Donut definitely carries the story. Even though this is a very bro-ish book, it still had, like, its funny moments, specifically because of Princess Donut. And it was just a very fast-paced, fun read. And I just want to continue on with the series, and I probably am going to continue on with the series this month as well. But this was also one of my favorites. As you can see, I liked it so much that I got it bedazzled. Can you see it? Can you see the bedazzled? I hope you can see the bedazzle. I hope you can see the bedazzle. So anyways, you guys, that is all 19 books that I read this month. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell to be notified when I post. I post twice a week. And yes, thank you guys so much for watching, and make sure to follow me on Instagram and all those little things down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!